Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I got a video request from Conspiracy Burger, who did a video asking me to kind of help explain how it is that the Federal Reserve is bailing out like banks and corporations and different things like that. And I'm not going to pretend that I understand the Fed charter. I'm not going to tell you that I've read it because I haven't. And I couldn't tell you exactly all the inner workings of the Federal Reserve and how they do things. But I do understand how it is that they are able to inject money into the system. And they do it through treasuries and mortgage-backed securities and other purchases like that, which are loans, like Conspiracy Burger said in his video. They are loaning money into the system. But when they buy these treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, what they are doing, they are buying those off of the big banks. And so and they're referred to as the primary dealers of treasuries. So when the treasury goes to sell their bonds into the market, when they're asking for loans, the big banks are buying those treasuries. The Federal Reserve then comes in and buys those treasuries from the big banks. So once the Federal Reserve is stepping in, those treasuries have already been purchased in a sense. And they're coming in and then buying those and putting them on their balance sheet. During the '08 financial crisis, when we had the mortgage-backed securities go, toxic in a sense, all these banks had these mortgage-backed securities sitting on their balance sheet, and they're like, man, these things are toxic. We're going to go bankrupt because these people aren't paying them. The Federal Reserve stepped in and bought those mortgage-backed securities off those banks. They were buying the toxic assets. And again, they're not like stepping in and just injecting money into the system. What they are doing is they're buying stuff that's already been purchased or loaning money, right? Because they don't buy anything. And now, right now, you're hearing a lot about how the Federal Reserve is bailing out companies, in a sense, by buying junk assets or junk bonds. And again, this is not exactly what is happening because they're doing it through special purpose vehicles. And now the special purpose vehicle is essentially the Federal Reserve buying up of commercial paper. And the best way to kind of explain commercial paper is like a company may have like an invoice that they're going to get paid on. And so they'll sell a commercial paper, like let's say it's $100 face value, they'll sell it for $90. And so this is generally like a very safe purchase because they're pretty much are guaranteed that they're going to get paid for this thing. They just haven't done it yet. And so they sell the commercial paper so they have the cash on hand. And I'm not going to go too deep into it because we could probably talk about commercial paper for a while on just that. But that's essentially how they're doing it through the special purpose vehicle. But again, that's through, the bank's system, through the banking system. Okay. So the Federal Reserve, when they go to bail out, like, say back in like with AIG and some of these other corporations and stuff like that, again, I don't think it's necessarily the Federal Reserve that is doing it, but what they are doing is that they're giving the government, the United States government, the ability to bail those companies out. So you have like the Troubled Asset Relief Program, and this is where the United States government was buying preferred stock from these corporations. And now preferred stock is a lot like any other stock or bond. It's kind of almost like a hybrid between the two. See, like, typically like a stock and a dividend is like how well the company is performing will determine how much the dividend pays. Preferred stock is like a set amount. Like, this stock is guaranteed, as long as you hold it, is guaranteed to pay a certain amount of dividend to it. And anyway, I'm not going to get too much into like what a preferred stock is, but that's essentially what is happening there, is that the Federal Reserve is providing the liquidity to the big banks to buy the treasuries from the United States government, who then in turn is bailing out these companies. And so that's how the Federal Reserve is bailing out the banks, bailing out the corporations and stuff like that. It's through the big bank system, the big banking system. I hope that kind of explains it. I kind of oversimplified it, but I think I'm just trying to kind of give you guys the idea or the gist of how that all works, as opposed to like really breaking down the inner workings of it. But I think that probably does a pretty good job of kind of explaining it. Now, he also asked about negative yielding bonds, and like the only people who would ever be willing to buy the negative yielding bonds would be the Federal Reserve and buying the Treasury's negative yielding bonds. But that's not exactly true because if you think about it like this, if you could borrow money, like let's not use negative for just a minute and just kind of imagine, low yielding for just a moment, because a bond itself has a coupon and then it has a yield. And so if you can imagine, like if you buy a bond for $100 that pays 10% interest, you're going to get $10 every time it pays, for like if it pays for 10 years, you get $10 a year. Okay. And then when the bond matures, you get the face value of the bond. So if you bought that bond for $100, then it has a 10% interest rate, it has a 10% yield. But say you paid $110 for that bond. Well, the interest rate, the coupon is still the same, 10%. You'll still get $10 on it, but the yield has dropped because now what it's paying you after you have made the purchase is less than if you had bought it at $100. So you got yields and you got coupon, and that's the difference. And the reason why they call it a coupon is because back in the day when you actually bought paper bonds, when you actually had the physical bond in your hand, there was a little coupon that was actually attached to it, and you would tear that off and go and cash it in, and you would get paid for that coupon. But now everything's like electronic, so it's called a coupon rate, but there's no coupon to tear off and cash in any longer. It's just, it's just the bond and electronic payment that you get. So you have the coupon rate, which is what the bond promises to pay as far as the interest, and then you have the yield, which is what you're going to get after the purchase of the bond. And as interest rates drop, the bond you can have on hand sells for a profit. So if you bought $100 for it, but interest rates on the next bonds that come out, or say you bought yours at 10%, but now they're selling bonds with a 9% coupon to it, the price that you get to sell your $100 bond for goes up because it has a higher interest rate attached to it. Make sense? So yield and coupon are two different things. When interest rates go negative, that's a negative yield. That means people are willing to pay more than what all those coupons are going to pay plus the face value. So that's how come interest rates can go negative on a yield. Now, most of the time, people, when they're buying these negative yielding bonds, they're anticipating that interest rates are going to continue to drop into the future and that they'll be able to sell that bond for a profit. To buy a negative yielding bond and say, I'm going to hold on to this thing for maturity, is a guaranteed loss. So who would buy a negative yielding bond? Right? People who are anticipating that interest rates are going to drop into the future, are going to continue to drop. So when you have the Federal Reserve stepping out there, or not just the Federal Reserve, but a central bank saying, we promise that we're going to come out there and we're going to buy $50 billion worth of bonds. Okay, that is them jawboning, trying to anticipate that people are going to run out there and front run the central bank and the bond purchases. So people are like, oh man, the central bank's going to go out there and buy a bunch of these bonds. I'm going to go out there and buy them before they can drop the interest rates down on the yield. And then I'm going to sell that bond to the central bank because I'm going to run out there and buy it before the central bank starts their action. And when they start dropping interest rates, I'm going to sell mine for a profit. That's the people who are anticipating on making money from a negative yielding bond. But to buy that thing and hold on to it for maturity is a guaranteed loss. Nobody's going to do that. Now, there is also another group of people out there, and those are people who do carry trade. So let's not think about negative for just a minute and just think about positive. If you can borrow money at 10% interest and then go and lend it out at 15% interest and keep the difference in between, that's a carry trade. And there's a lot of people who do that. So they'll borrow in their local currency. So like say Japan has interest rates at 1%, let's just make up a number, has interest rates at 1%, and then they can turn around and borrow money at 1% interest and then go around and lend that out to the United States government at 2% interest and keep the difference in between. That's a carry trade. And that's where a lot of people are trying to probably make money by buying negative yielding bonds, is that they are able to borrow money at an even cheaper rate and lend it out at a more expensive rate and keep the difference in between. All right. So I hope that kind of explains a lot about, how negative interest rates are going to work. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know. Thank you, Conspiracy Burger. And go and check out Conspiracy Burger's videos. Go give him a likes on his Uneducated Economist request video, and let him know what you think about the negative yielding rates and how it is that the Federal Reserve bails out banks. All right. Thank you, guys. Talk to you later.